everyone. Thank you for joining us. So today's program is History is in the Caption, Fariba Hajamadi in conversation with Judith Rodenbeck. My name is Lindsay Hamill. I'm the Director of Education and Public Programs. I'd like to welcome you all here today. Before we begin, we at UCR Arts would like to respectfully acknowledge and recognize our responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air. The Cahuilla, Gabrielino Tongva, Luiseño, and Serrano peoples, and all of their ancestors and descendants, past, present, and future. Today, this meeting place is home to many Indigenous peoples from all over the world, including UCR faculty, students, and staff. And we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on this homeland. So today's conversation is about the exhibition Fariba Hajamadi, History is in the Caption. It is curated by Senior Curator Joanna Stupinska with support from Hannah Waiters, and will be on view here at the Culver Center of the Arts through March 22nd. So I'll now turn it over to Joanna to introduce our speakers.
Thanks for coming, everyone. Welcome to the Culver Center of the Arts. I'll welcome very briefly our esteemed speakers, Judith Rodenbeck, a cultural historian whose research concentrates on intermedial art practices since 1945. Judith writes about art of the 20th and 21st centuries for both scholarly and popular publications, and is a professor in the Department of Media and Cultural Studies here at UCR. She conducted the interview that is printed in Fariba's gallery guide, so check that out. Fariba Hajamadi is an artist whose career has an exciting and I think admirable origin story. I hope you don't mind that I'll share it. She ditched med school. Listen, students. She ditched med school in Tehran to study art in the US in the 1980s. She earned her BFA at Western Michigan University and her MFA at Cal Arts, then moved back east, where she taught art at a community college, raised her daughter, and continued her art practice. She exhibited widely at institutions including the New Museum in New York, Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago, ICA Philadelphia, Musée Moderne Paris, and Museum Fridericianum Kassel. A few years ago, she decided to come back to the West Coast and established a studio in Venice, which is how we met when we came back. Most of the works on view in the show are from these recent years, yet still gesture to the great cultural institutions of New York and Europe. Together, History is in the Caption examines how cultural, educational, and public institutions shape narratives of history and culture, and I'm looking forward to diving in to think about these issues with you all today.
Thank you for that welcome, and hello again in the context of this beautiful show. So I have a bunch of little questions and prompts, and the print is way too tiny for me to read, but I will try to launch in. I thought it might be useful, both for myself and for the gathered, to think about at the very outset the title of your show, because I know it's titles often are significant, but it is significant, and it can serve as a prompt also, unfortunately, astonishingly timely prompt today. So I wanted to think about history and the caption and how those work, and I want to kind of flip things and think first of all about captions, because captions have a way of framing images for us, of delivering pre-delivering a certain kind of information. They can guide our viewing. But they can also limit our viewing. Sometimes they complicate our interpretation, which I think absolutely is the case here. And they can even contradict what's in the picture. And so they also raise questions of a kind of authority of the image, like who actually names the image and what's in the image. And we'll talk about this image in a moment, but there's a main character in the image behind us.
The cat.
The cat, right, who has a proper name, who names the image, who controls the narrative. and who controls the memory embedded in the image. So I hope our conversation today, we mean to circle around various topics: memory, history, exile. I'm interested in questions of translation also. I think we might want to think about. So caption, what is caption?
Well, I mean, you already hit on it. I mean, the caption, when I think of it, it's often in museums nowadays, especially. It seems like in the past 30 years, they have continuously gotten more and more elaborate. And that didn't used to be the case, but now it is the case, even for contemporary art. There's a big story which I don't know if people stop to read. How much of it do you read? I don't know. But I myself always thought that how much of that was correct. And sometimes I remember if it was in a museum and if it was about something cultural, like cultural memory stuff, that I found that they weren't necessarily correct, But I don't even think that anybody really, it's not really a question of correctness at all. It's just a story. It's a story.
Like a guiding prompt. But the earliest works in the show, actually, you're looking at
the labels that you can't read. They're out of focus, right? I definitely made a point of that, and that was obviously a kind of a hint, or an obvious hint to that same notion. And it's also about our kind of the questions how we read artifacts and images and artworks and everything, that I think there's an assumption that there's like about history as well, that there's one way to read things, and that also, coming from my point of view, is not the case. And that may be where we can talk about exile as well. And I think that's a condition that maybe an exile is, before that is having come from different places. You cannot have one point of view. You have two point of views. You have a double vision, a different way of looking at things.
There's, you can think about exile. It's Edward Said called that a contrapuntal consciousness.
Right.
Yeah, and he's drawing from music as an analogy, the counterpoint in music. Holding multiple cultural perspectives simultaneously, not necessarily at the same weight,
right,
per se.
Right, like they can go in different directions. I mean, I talk about my own work in the sense that the narratives are not linear. They can go in a lot of different directions. They can operate on different levels. And the transparencies in my work, like with the colors and the layers, and the complexities are kind of the same,
Can we give an example? Like the bridal fabric.
Right. Well, that's an obvious one, right? Yeah. That's kind of like where you can see the material that it's always been like that. I really like to see underneath things, if I can say that, right? And kind of referring to the surface and what's under the surface, perhaps in terms of, meaning, how we read things, and then again, how in each of these pieces, a whole is made out of, several layered components.
Including transparent layers.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Semi-transparent layers.
Yes.
I think that's
what I meant. Yeah. So it can be literally as well.
Right. On top.
Right. Conceptually and literally. Yeah.
So So exile, if we go back to thinking about exile, Said has this contrapuntal consciousness, which is a little bit like the double consciousness of Du Bois in certain ways. Part of the sort of package of exile includes memory shaped by loss, right? But also fantasies of some home,
Right.
or
Exactly. I think that I have written about my own work as a way that I'm always looking for, a home that I lost, looking for the lost things, and in one way, kind of creating these interiors or kind of like trying to create a space. And the memory stuff the memory comes in, I think, from cultural memory. I mean, there are objects, carpets, things from somewhere else. They were displaced. And then I took a picture of them and they became displaced for a time, but then I reconstructed a space for it. And that space is just a space that maybe we can enter into and maybe not. Maybe it is impossible to enter.
that to me is interesting in terms of thinking about history versus storytelling, right? And all written or narrated history obviously is storytelling and has a
Yes.
narrative to it, but it cops to that or it does not. Right? There's a rhetoric to it. So the storytelling is a part where you want to bring, like the caption, you want to bring certain things out. You might want to contain other parts, and there's a question of who gets to author the story. Yeah.
Well, I mean that's one of the one of the things that I guess I kind of investigate in my work is just asking this question about the origins of these scenes, which would be the museums or a monument. Mostly in the museum, the monuments are work in a different way. But in museums, somebody assembles a staged narrative of sorts. I find them always really vague and very theatrical, and it's a question, but it also points to a lot of things. It points to the question of where and how did these objects and artifacts, where they come from, and how did they get to be? And that points to the 19th century and 20th century of remapping the world and populations move in, and that's how the museums came about. Perhaps is that the artifacts were removed from their original context, and for the purpose of touristic reasons, maybe. I mean, that's what we do in museums, right? So
Multiple reasons.
Multiple
Conquest,
reasons,
tourism,
of
cultural
course.
certification in a way, cultural rescripting. When we spoke before, we're in a room with these pieces of manuscript, of a sort of disassembled manuscript.
right.
And
There are pages of manuscripts from where they came from. They're torn from books often and sold separately, and they've changed hands. Lots of stories behind them. Yes.
Yeah.
So it does point to the kind of the manner of acquisition as well.
Okay.
So, a lot of things, politics.
It's packed. It's
Yeah.
a packed topic. So,
Yeah.
so one of the things that typifies your work as an organization is symmetrical. It's very spatially organized, almost architectural, and that's constructed as a sort of quasi-theatrical space that we don't necessarily walk into, but we confront.
Right. I mean, they're forced. I mean, for me, I actually literally force them to go into this kind of form. And, one of those ways that a technique that I have been using is this mirroring of the same image, which you can see everywhere. And, and that reflects, of course, the photography works that way, of course, obviously, it's a mirror. But also it creates this kind of, it talks about authority and symmetry kind of is a visual presentation of authority, if I can say so. And so there's an axis, and then the symmetry lines and all the object, everything kind of goes outwards from the center.
It's confrontational, actually.
I guess so.
It can be,
yes.
or can be.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's sometimes claustrophobic as well.
Okay, claustrophobic. Yes, we'll go with it. And yet,
Not to be negative, but
this is both symmetrical and not at all.
right.
It's magic.
None of them are actually 100%. If you
Uh-huh.
actually try to do that, it's impossible. There's multiple points of perspective in all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're not real. I mean, they're fabricated. And that's the giveaway, right? It's not trying to represent a real space. So from the repetitions, from the mirroring, and the symmetry and all, kind of gives you a clue that it's not the real space. It's not meant to be, of course.
Does that, for you, resonate with this question of exile?
Somewhat, I guess. I mean, it's funny thinking about it. I mean, I didn't consciously start doing that, thinking, "Oh, exile this," right?
Exile X, right? Yeah.
It didn't work that way, but I see it now. I see it now that it's almost like a performance. I was thinking of creating a space, constantly trying to force things into a space that looks familiar, that can be,
And yet so patterned, right? The intensity of the patterning and the claustrophobia is heightened. It's not just symmetrical, but also filled with repeated decorative motifs that are actually very delicate and complex. Yeah.
Well, I think that the decorative motifs, I guess we're talking about these two pieces, maybe, right?
Well, or even the marbling on
Yes, it's true. The marbling works the same way. Correct. But I think they all have a kind of, again, talking about cultural memory, I think that they have very direct places in history they go, or culture they are assigned to. Like, a lot of people ask me, is that a Persian carpet? In fact, it's not a Persian carpet. It's an Ottoman carpet. But and that one is actually from India. It's not close by. But anyway, but that doesn't change the pattern. Yes.
right. Right. Well, and there's signifiers in these contexts of
They're covering the
Non-Europe,
walls,
right.
right? They're surrounding us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and kind of muting sound. Actually, that's also their function.
There was.
They're muting the sound a little.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I think so. I think of them as very silent. photographs are silent, right? Yeah.
And that's why you give them captions, right?
Yes. That's why we have to give them captions. They're silent.
Yeah.
But we make them talk.
We make them talk. I mean, so this is where this question of telling, your images are telling stories. They're based on images taken in museums, and in the case of the images of people out in the front space, those are people who were in the space that you came upon. You didn't stage them. They're there. So there's a kind of quasi-journalistic grounding.
Definitely, documentary, we could say, perhaps,
Okay.
yeah.
Yes, that's where I was going. Like
Yeah.
documentary, and yet procedurally what you're doing is undermining our certitude about the document. Right?
Well, exactly, because, again, going back to the Museum of Historical, kind of institutions that create this cultural memory, they're removed from their original context, right? From where they come from, their location. So, how do they refer to the place they came from? How do they function? I mean, I guess the question is, how do they function? Which is what you were talking about with the film by Alain René and
Les statues numéros.
Yes.
Statues also.
right,
Yeah.
which is they talk about the same thing first.
Right. So in that film, it's made in, I want to say 1958, 59. It's
Yeah, these 60s, yeah.
people moving through the Musée de l'Homme, looking at a variety of statues, of African objects, and lots of French people, white French people moving through, and then black French people. And the question is, what is the experience of this work of art in its objecthood, and how does it differ from person to person? How does it register? But also, how is the object itself contained, controlled, and at a certain level, like de-energized by being in this
Right.
vitrine context? Yeah?
Meaning that they don't really refer to where they came from. You know, they don't function that way, so they've lost the kind of meaning. And
Yeah, and they also attempt to contain the fact of French colonization of sub-Saharan Africa. Well,
yeah, I mean, all of those questions go along with it, I think.
yeah.
You don't have to really spell them.
No, but I want to like nudge a little bit because when we had our earlier conversation, we talked about the Shahnameh and this destruction of the book in the name of producing saleable paintings, basically for New York art investors. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean that is the history of museums. I mean, it's not a pretty one. We know that, and I think that a lot of it, to me, it kind of makes me think of Luden. That how did they came about? It was Luden in one sense or another,
Mhm.
perhaps.
You can sort of like these are exilic objects too, in a sense.
Yeah.
And that's how I have been thinking also about the question of monuments and the monuments show and the sort of interesting and accidental juxtaposition of this
Mm-hmm.
show temporarily with a show devoted to these what would we call them? Demounted and then remounted in their demounted state Confederate statues, right? Not to say you're looking at Confederate statues, but monuments of things that signify in a certain way, right? And you recontextualize them and think again about what is the history that those things tell.
I think that in the cases of these pictures that I took, I think there's a pretension that there's an actuality and some kind of fact that's being presented with facts. And I guess my point is that, what you were talking about, narrative, I mean, that is a narrative, no matter what. And so, I mean, because this is the mirror of it. It's another narrative. It's, what I've done is I construct, something different, a different kind of narrative. Again, it's a duality. So these refer both to the objects they wear, I guess, which is in the museum. So they're Western and Eastern. They're me. So maybe there's a triple reading here. They can also go in a circle, maybe radial, comes and goes.
Spiral. Yeah.
Spiral.
Because I was thinking a lot about translation, actually this morning, thinking about translation and particularly thinking, there's an essay by Walter Benjamin on translation called The Task of the Translator. It's from 1921. It's an early essay. No, wouldn't need to, everybody else is falling asleep the minute I say it, but...
Did you read this?
So there's this essay, and what he says is the task of the translator. He says that the mistake is to think that you can find perfect equivalences from one language to another language, right?
Exactly.
And that's a bad translation. And so Google Translate, sorry, it's bad. And it will be, but there's some other, and he's a little bit mystical here, and he's in his mystical phase, whatever, which we're different. But he says that the task of the translator consists in finding the particular intention towards the target language, which produces in that language the echo of the original. So there's something about resonance of the object, and what struck me is that there is a way to think about what you've done, that is both translating the museum, what the museum's done, into a language that somehow honors the object that's been displaced into the museum, with a set of objects. It's a weird essay, but it's also thinking about what it means to shuttle between orders of communication that are maybe analogous, but not 100% compatible. Yeah.
I'm a little bit lost.
That's a little weird. All right. It's like, what gets lost in translation? What kinds of history, stories, capacities, and let's just take one more step to think about what it means to be in exile and working in a second. We're talking in English.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a second language for me too. No, whatever. But that's another language, right? And
yes.
English has certain capacities. It's a very baggy, interesting language that way, but it also has certain incapacities. And images possibly work in an analogous way.
In the same way, correct, yes. Because, I mean, I talk about the images, the way I use the images are very similar to language. But not, again, it's not a linear reading. And again, I think it's implicit in it that there's more than one translation, obviously, but there's nothing exact about any of this work. I'm not trying to remake any space. I don't know these spaces. They don't exist in reality.
I don't know if everybody knows that.
No, that these you mean the spaces in my work, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, this one exists, but not in this format, right? I mean, I think...
Well, it sort of exists, right? I mean, it has some funny features in your image.
Yeah, people who've seen the space, they recognize it, yeah.
So I could find this space or that space or that space, and then I would say, wait a minute, what on earth did Fariba do to this thing? This is really weird, yeah?
Well, yes, I mean, I think some of it is the nature of the way I work. I mean, from the beginning, it was an accident. I was wandering around in museums and, these kind of places and monuments and houses of poets and this and that, and kind of looking for something, and it just came to me, that I kind of identified with the objects in the museum in a way that, they were just out of context, So, now I forget what you asked me. What was your question?
It was about real spaces.
Oh.
And it's a sort of reality effect, maybe.
I think that's just the photographic nature. Personally, I think they're surreal. I think there is definitely a desire to make them look real.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely an effort that goes in that direction.
But it's not 1,000%.
Not at all.
No.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you want
Some more than others,
Yeah.
Go ahead, you say.
well, you want us to feel them nearly real and then not quite, like pulling away. Let's push on the surreal aspect a little teeny bit.
Well, I think that in a way it's kind of stuff that's in my mind, maybe, it's the way I work is just, it comes out. I don't always plan them. They kind of make themselves, in a sense.
Okay. Let's talk about let's talk about how you make them, actually. Your work is related to photo montage, and with the advent of digital tools, that shifted, sort of. But you're also, and it's you have to look really closely, but you're also painting on
Right.
some of these. Yeah.
Both digitally and by hand, by the way. You can paint digitally as well. And they're very, very manipulative in a sense to get a certain effect, I guess, to kind of mold them into a unit as opposed to desperate, object.
Okay, so classic photo montage in its early, Western European
Right.
phase, you actually look at, you see the cut, and that was the sort of magic. The magic of it at one level was the desecration of the unity of the photograph.
But you also have photomontage in movies, and doesn't see the cut. You don't see the cuts at all.
Ah.
And in advertising that we know of, you don't see the cuts. So we've already had a kind of a perfect montage for quite a long time.
Mm-hmm. So tell us, can you give for?
But what I wanted to say is that I think a lot of this montage and moving things in my pieces, it is also just a reflection of the way we see things. Everything is that we see is mediated, right? So it is a reflection on that, I think. One can't help it in a sense.
There's also something about shifting attention within any individual work. Yeah, which is why the cat, I think, is so important,
Right.
because that's how they
It's
see.
a strategy, yes, it's a composition.
Yeah, but it's, the thing where the cat has a sort of universal view of what's in front of it, and then there'll be some tiny movement over here, and that's where the attention goes, flip like that.
Oh, those are all the nature of photography, right? When it's preserved, for
Mhm.
sure.
Mhm.
And I try to preserve that.
We talked about I think we talked about the punctum, didn't we, last time we spoke? Roland Barthes' punctum.
Yes.
Thinking about the
Yes.
photograph and the affective photograph, when you encounter an image and there is some element in it somehow that works on you.
You're attracted to, right? I mean, he talks about the subjectivity of photographs, and I'm totally into that. I mean, that's what I do. After I take the pictures, I'm looking at them and I'm start constructing things. It's all subjective. It just becomes more and more and more. But it's just not on a picture that's just taken once. So it's hard to explain.
So when you're working with, since this one's here, can you tell us how it's? You don't have to reveal everything, but
Well,
just what's assembled here?
Well, I
Because
couldn't actually tell you anymore because it takes me sometimes, 6 months to a year to build these spaces, and I rework them. But it's all photographs from the same place,
Yeah.
including the cat.
including Glee.
Yes, Glee is from Hagia Sophia, and but I wanted, like, for those who've seen this place, the place is absolutely enormous, grand, and monumental. And I felt like, how could I bring this smaller, like as if all those pictures I took, I could fit it into one frame, one memory, That's what I was thinking. And so I just kept adding all the pictures. So this is probably made from 16 or 20 photographs, different photographs of the same place though. So, and there is still mirroring. You might just not notice it, but it's there. It's a little tricky, this one. There's negative and positive also, if you look at the doorway. But I've used those techniques from the beginning, from a very long time ago when I used, those are darkroom techniques in a way, that I played with.
Is there painting in this one?
Yes, I mean, there is, everything is, in a way, you can call it touched up, you can call it enhanced. I work on them on many levels. And then once I go to print them, I still have to modify the image to make it actually come out in a way that I like, which is, I like them to be painterly. I don't want them to look like, well, they won't, but they just have their own nature. They won't look like real photographs, I don't think. But,
See, there's mirroring in these marble pieces.
well, yeah, that's how they
so
were.
that-
That's how they were designed, also. Because when you cut the stone and you flip it,
Yeah.
that creates a mirror.
So there's some truth to the subject of Hagia Sophia in the device of mirroring that you're using as well.
I saw it there, but
Yeah.
it's that's how they made the design. So, for instance, if you look down there,
Yeah.
that marble is the way it is, but it's the fact of cutting a stone.
Yeah.
Like if you think of it as a marble cake, you cut it in half and then you open it, and then that's how they made a lot of the patterns. And that's also true of the Islamic patterns in the designs, or
So
the same way.
Yeah.
They're mirrored images, yeah. Mirrored.
So that's again about symmetry.
It is, and I think that's sometimes I wonder if that kind of creeped into my work from what I was exposed to in terms of architecture, and the design. But I don't know. That could just be in my mind.
A strategy.
Another possibility. I don't know.
A strategy. Can we talk about the installation next door
Yes,
a bit?
sure.
Can you tell us about it?
Oh, sure.
And then maybe I'll bother you a little bit, or yes, you tell us about it, and I'll tell you what hit me.
Okay, well, I mean, it's another environment. It's just a real one that we can actually walk into. It's like another room. So I started doing wallpapers. Actually, I did these installations like in late 80s, 90s, and I was working in France, and I was accidentally working near where they made these wallpapers, which is called Code de Juillet. It's a well-known French design of wallpapers that's from 18th century to 19th century, I think. And they usually, I'm sure you've seen them, they have these kind of idyllic scenes in the prairie with, kind of nice things happening, people hanging out, sheep going by. But also they used to make, so that's where I somehow it just kind of came together, the patterns and telling stories in the wallpaper. But they did make political ones also, and historical ones. They're very rare, though. But the ones that most people know are from domestic kind of scenes. Anyway, so I thought that for these, I just wanted to. But I always thought of them as an environment, not just as an environment, but as a background, kind of like what's in the background around us all the time, And so those had 4 themes, the ones that I made in the early 90s. There was a hunting room, there was a erotic room, there was violence, a war room, and there was a rape room. But in this one is completely different, and I concentrated on telling the history, a kind of a history in my way, and kind of that relates to me. And I just started thinking about what is going on today in Iran, and a lot of the images that I had collected. So they're drawings from images that I had collected from the internet, that are documents, photographs. And so, so there's a drawing of the first refinery. Of course, nobody will know that except me, but there are hints, right? I mean, everybody who thinks about Iran thinks about oil. I think that goes without saying. There are images of the wars, from the Iraq-Iran wars. There are images from the hangings from the cranes, which is just an unbelievable, uncivilized way that of things that go on that people don't know and they don't want to know either, actually, I think. But so I was thinking of, but I had all these images, but then I also threw in some other things. And one of the things that inspired it was pictures that I had taken in Iran in 2017 or something. Anywhere, I come from a city has a lot of historic monuments in it, and so therefore, kind of tourists milling around and mosques and stuff. But they're not mosques that people pray in or anything. They're just like museums in a sense, like Hagia Sophia. People walk through them. But everywhere you looked, and a lot of my pictures, there are like speakers everywhere. So then I think you asked me, don't they have speakers for the call to the prayer?
Mm-hmm.
They do, but this is not what these were. These are just speakers pointing to the common space, to the public space, of outside, like pointing outside the buildings, so to the crowds, I guess, that would be there. And so I wanted to do something with that. And so I brought that into the wallpaper, and I also made the sculpture out of ceramics. But anyway, back to the wallpaper, there are a lot of images in there. There's the main character is a div, which comes from diva, divine, and he or she is pre-Islamic, but actually the Zoroastrians, it's even pre-Zoroastrian, and they were supposed to be God, but since Zoroastrians came and they unified all the gods, so there was only one God. So this was against their belief. Therefore, Div, the divine, became evil somehow. He's no good anymore. And
Demons.
Div became demons. But it's part of the folklore in Iran, and you also see them in a lot of old manuscripts, of course, and in Shahnameh, which you mentioned. Yes, they're in that one too. Yeah, they're in a lot of books, different kinds of books. And they have different functions. Like that's a book of magic and stuff like that, I think, as opposed to the Shahnameh, which is a historical account. But I went with the kind of div that I was familiar with, which is I remember in my grandmother's house, they would say, if you did something bad, the div is going to come and steal you and take you away. I don't know, all these stories that are in basements or whatever. They come to you in your dreams, but all this stuff just kind of floats around. But the div is actually this naughty character. He's a trickster of sorts. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, I kind of went with the demon side of it, maybe, and the kind of caricature aspect of it in the wallpaper. Don't ask me why, I don't know, but so I combined a lot of these images into one, just kind of my memory, real stories, facts, memories, literature. Mm-hmm. The prose, for instance, is from literature, that I remember, stories about the crows that, talk and tell stories. And they're witnesses, basically. So they're just lingering and watching and witness. And the donkeys are associated with mullahs somehow. There are always images of them, and, again, folklore Iran of, the mullah mullahs were not wealthy, and they sat on, mules and donkeys and stuff, right, for transportation. But I don't know how much of this stuff is just, funny stories, and how much of it is real, of course. But what else was I going to say about that? But it's funny because I was just in the Louvre, and there's a wooden statue of Jesus on a mule, a life-size. So obviously this is old, right? This mule carrying
Some sort of version of humility. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. So
Animal cognates.
it's not a horse. It's not like a
There's a Buddha. Well, if you do
Mule.
a peace walk as a Buddha, you're walking on your feet. But I guess you know. I don't know.
Hey, it's not a mule. It's got a mule.
So the wallpaper from afar is kind of lively
Right.
and chipper and
Well, I thought that the images in there were so depressing that
yeah.
I did want, and you see that in my other work also, that from far away something seems one way, but then you get close to it and it becomes something else. And so yeah, I did want it to have a watercolory kind of effect of real wallpapers that you would see in a kid's room or something.
Mhm.
Kind of lighten the effect.
Yeah, so you've got these documentary images, first of all, that have to do with the kind of
History,
History.
recent history, of course.
Recent.
History.
recent history of depredations, basically. Political histories.
Right.
And then an overlay that has to do with witnessing. And I would say that the Deebs, I'm spitballing here, are both disruptive and corrective figures, right?
Yeah, they definitely have a duality to them.
As well as pointing to a deep history in the region.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't have anything exact in mind. It's just something that I did maybe because of the way, the kind of attitude towards the mullahs that exist amongst Iranians anyway, So, to say more. It's always been like that. I don't know if I've thought about it, but ever since I was a kid, people, it's just one of the jokes, and I don't know if it's because, Islam itself was, in Iran, was as a result of the conquering of the land, by Arabs that brought, and ruled the land and forced it.
So it was an import or an overlay.
Absolutely,
An overlay.
a language we don't speak and don't understand. And,
Complicated. Well, and then it's important, I think, that the speakers, these sort of loudspeakers, they're everywhere in the wallpaper, and then you have these terracotta versions, and they're kind of sealed off.
Yeah, they
they're mute.
become about. I think they become about silence, and I think that also back to the picture that I took is, this enormous oppression, and the speakers control, and silence goes with it because on many levels, both for people who have no voice to speak against it and not allowed, and also cultural silence everywhere. That is kind of everyone ignoring that something really horrible is going on.
Yeah. When I saw them, I had like a variety of
What did you think?
a reference. The first thing I thought about was, weirdly, Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is Chaplin's, it's not a silent film, but he's a silent film person. He actually speaks famously, and he gives a speech that sort of kills his career because it's anti-fascist. But in The Great Dictator, he plays both the Great Dictator, who's a mock double of Hitler, and a Jewish barber. And the Jewish barber, you see him moving through his piece of town, does his little things, and then there are speakers outside, which is how the dictatorship actually controls the people. It's through the use of
And that
sound.
hasn't really changed much.
No, it happens in North Korea. It's a talk radio in the U.S. It's the same thing.
Right, exactly. I mean, we're also controlled the same way. It's just taking a different shape. So yeah, I mean, you can't help it. It has a very obvious, reference. I was thinking about it, and I wanted to do something with that. But there also the middle sculpture are sirens, and sirens are supposed to kind of warn us and make a loud sound in case of danger, an alarm, and that's also silence.
So you had to make it like kids' wallpaper because it's really heavy.
I guess we could say that, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about sound, too, is that it penetrates, right? You don't have to be looking at it, facing it. It surrounds you in a way that's different from
It does,
confronting an image.
Right.
So there's...
Yes, so that kind of goes along with the wallpaper, I think, being in it, being surrounded by a silence.
Yeah. Upbeat. Oh, there you are. I'm not even looking at you. Yes, is it allowed?
Of course.
You're the boss.
We were actually here yesterday, and Fariba was doing about some historian on Iran and the Ottoman Empire. I just wrote a section on Esfahan. I'm writing on Saturdays. So I'm so glad to find out that you're also from Esfahan. I read your bio.
Oh,
And I can see, the inspiration from this amazing city. You should go online and look at the amazing city that she grew up in. I grew up in Tabriz.
yes.
So anyway, I think, the points that you were making about that wallpaper, so we walked in there with my students, and we were talking about the protests in Iran, very recent, and the violence, of course, that, we have all witnessed in the news media. So I was quite taken by that wallpaper, and I think you're right, you do document, not just the recent violence, but,
Constant, yeah.
throughout the history lessons, the 20th century in general, because even the Kassel dynasty committed a lot of violence and so forth. So I was wondering, do you feel that your work has taken a different turn? I haven't seen your earlier wallpapers. I mean, these are amazing. I really love them, but they tell a different story. But that one is very immediate.
Well, yeah, because the nature of it, it is different. I think it's the first time that I've done work that has a direct connection to me, and I think it was a few years back. I was talking to a friend from Cal Arts, Luciano Perno. And he said to me, Fariba, I think you should do something from your own country. That just, I couldn't get that out of my head. I think it's ironic on a lot of levels when we talk about my work, right? But anyway, so I thought, well, I would try that. It's been on my mind, so. And I couldn't help it. I wanted to do something like I said, I'm not done with it, with that experience of being in Iran and the speakers and I mean, the speakers weren't making any noise or anything. Nothing was playing on, and then I wasn't even sure if they were really working or not. Are they connected to anything? But they're present. It's a very strong signifier, I think.
And the oil that you have in there, of course, when they run it off or other that.
I'm sorry.
The
Okay.
oil spill. The oil
Oh, the
spill
oils-
The refineries. I also think that it's a kind of 20th century context to Iran's history.
It
The
is.
colonialism that you deal with, right, the British involvement, the coup in 1953. Right, so it's really so important to frame that and do it with
Exactly.
both
Yeah.
in terms of environmental hazards and also the larger, historical backdrop
Hmm.
of that violence
Right.
that we witnessed.
Right. I mean, and yet, even though that really refers to me so very specifically here, it isn't a unique experience, really. I mean, I think that, again, in the modernity in 20th century has so much violence in it, a lot of it, a lot more. Not that it didn't happen in other times, but that it's been sped up with, the kind of tools that have become available, in warfare, that. So I don't think it's a unique experience. Like being an exile is not a unique experience. It's unfortunately a very common experience.
I had a quick question about, it's kind of a two-folder, about your process in the transitional era between like, using a darkroom facility and more modern digital facilities. And also if you see like those beautiful examples in the vitrine in the front of those darkroom manipulations, if you see those objects as sort of a continuation or almost like additions of these larger images, or if they're almost like.
Those are really old. They're actually, they were never meant to be shown. So there's something, that's how I made the work. I would work, today we work on a computer, which is, the program mirrors what the darkroom does. All the names are the same, all the functions are the same. So it's like a digital darkroom. But that's the way we worked, back then. And then I would rephotograph those and then go back to the darkroom to make the large, projection works. But so we decided to show them here as artifacts from another era. But yeah, so your question was, I'm sorry, that.
Well,
Yeah, I answered it.
perfectly, yeah.
Cool.
Just to follow on that, I wanted to thank you for including them. I'm a professor over at UCR and I'm teaching a seminar on photo montage. And it was the first opportunity the students had to see how photo montage was made historically. At first, they all said, oh, we thought they were just photos, but then they could actually see how
Right.
cut and reassembled. It was a great clue for them. They spent an hour in here. We went from image to image. They had a lot to say about
That's great.
So this is the first thing I wanted to
Thank
thank you for actually.
Well, thank
bringing
you.
it in. And thanks to Joanna for saying, oh, you have to go for your students to see them. So, but I did have a question. If you can stand up, going all the way back to the beginning when you were talking about captions, you've made it clear that you very intentionally manipulated these, and you made them into surrealism and subjectivity. So I'm wondering why caption and not title?
Mm. Well, the caption is the titles.
I wondered if it was maybe, I don't know, is it a link maybe?
You mean history?
Toward photo montage?
This is the caption.
You mean that why wouldn't the title be?
Why wouldn't you call it a title? Why do you call it a caption rather than a title? Maybe that was Judith's issue. Because you're the one who said, sorry, you're the one who conflated them, I think.
No, the history is in the caption. I mean, caption for me, I'm sorry, I beg your pardon, but evokes, of course, Benjamin, because that was in my baby bottle. Was Benjamin thinking about the caption and how the caption inflects the
Yeah.
image? That's part of.
Caption
What's
is
taking
different
place.
than title. I mean, title is almost artistic, I guess, as caption could be. The caption is it's very literal, the caption in a magazine, right? Like, so caption is something very specific. It's the description of what we're looking at, right? And so that's different than a title.
Definitely, yeah.
Very
So
different.
it's
Context.
definitely a choice on your part.
Well, I wasn't
You think
thinking
of
about
titles.
titles at all. I was just thinking about captions. I don't know what to say.
I mean, caption claims a certain neutrality, but also a kind of targeted, targeting towards content, whereas
The title
can
could be
much-
poetic, it's
yeah.
artistic, it doesn't have anything to do
It
with
could be-
actuality.
It could be Hajamadi #1 or something like that.
Or untitled.
Yeah, Untitled #12. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I was gonna say one thing, I mean, the very conceptual, sociological, political, you get drawn in all these directions for work, but the one thing I would say also, it's deeply aesthetic. It takes you into a place, and I think you brought up surreal a couple times. They do have this surreal quality, they have a kind of magical quality. That's why you want to stand in front of it for so long and look at it. There's so much work that's conceptual, sociological, political.
But doesn't
Viewing
have,
it
right.
is not very engaging, in my opinion. You see something that's deconstructing the world, not so interesting to look at.
No,
It's interesting to think about.
Yeah.
These are interesting to look at as well. So are decisions made in that direction also. Like, this is a whole maze that you get lost in. So when you're making them, you speak about all these other things that you get involved with. But the aesthetic part, I think, and I wouldn't even say decorative, I would just say deeply aesthetic.
right. No, I agree, and I think I care about that as well, because I think that if I just wanted to talk about all the things that we talked about today, I could just do it very, very differently with text or photographs, but that's not my intention. I really care that we stop in front of this image, and I care that that it doesn't necessarily point to any specific ideas, and I care that it's visually interesting because it's an object and it's I care about it, and I don't have any good reasons behind it other than I want to be able to, I look at it myself, right? So I want it to be, it has to look to me, good to me first, then I have to enjoy it first, right? And I couldn't put it out there otherwise if I can't enjoy it. It's,
Yeah, I'm, into textiles, so, I'm framing my own work in terms of the textiles that came out of that culture, the removal, sapphire, or ornament. And I see that, those blend and possibly some there. I mean, you have architectural elements, but the textiles also sort of dominate. Is that from your childhood? Being surrounded by these beautiful carpets and rugs.
you can't help it. I mean, you're born on a carpet, you eat on a carpet, you sleep on the carpet. My house is full of carpets. There's a baby picture of me, like, I think completely naked, a total baby, like a newborn on a carpet.
Kids love those designs.
You can't help it. And then I have to say that, yes, that's
So why don't you have captions on your art?
titles, you mean?
I mean,
Caption.
you can call it anything.
You mean like describing the work or telling some story? But because it's visual, you're supposed to make the story. Well, no, I don't know. I think the fact of looking at something, there are objects to be looked at. It's not about reading of a text. Definitely not.
I think that the caption tells you what to
Right, what to expect.
what to be
What
looking
to think? Yeah.
for and at. I mean, I see specific things, and then I see other. I also grew up with a lot of carpets.
Right.
So some of which I recognize here.
Yeah.
But also I'm interested in what these figures are in the books, and then what is this bloody floor? There's lots and lots of stuff, and
Yeah.
you can go many, many, many different
Right.
directions that deliver different kinds. That's part of the aesthetic experience, is to kind of part of aesthetics is defeating the caption in a way.
Yeah, I mean, the
Exceeding
museum
the caption.
already does that. History does that already. We have books and things. So as art, it's to do the exact opposite of that.
So
Like
then you
said.
gave your show this crazy title.
What was that? Ironic, perhaps ironic title.
Yeah, well, I mean, it
And
delivers
it is
complexity.
It is very close to reality that, basically what, I mean, from the beginning, we know that the historians who wrote the history weren't necessarily, on the losing side.
No.
They were on the winning side. So the history that we have, it's just a story, maybe. Or
It is
one
a
side
story.
of it. It's one side of it.
It is a story, and we need to read it that way and understand that's what it is.
Yeah.
I just had a final question about, you mentioned that all of these images have gone under so many different iterations in the process of coming into what we see today. And I had a question just about like your, obviously as artists, like you have to go through a lot of cutting of what works and what doesn't. But I'm sure in the process of creating all of these, you come across images that continue to work despite maybe not fitting the task at hand that you were asking to do. So I guess I'm wondering about the process of cutting and
You mean with the choosing?
choosing, yeah.
Right, right.
Editing, yeah.
Well, yeah, I have an archive, and I might not use an image that I had taken 20 years ago, but I just go through them. I might go back to something. It's just how that's just the process, of looking and just what we were talking about before, which photographs just kind of holds my attention for one reason or another, which image,
Can I ask a totally dorky question?
Sure.
What kind of camera?
Do I use now? Well, most of these images were taken on a digital camera. It's a full format Nikon.
So fancy. Okay.
Well, I think it's already outdated. It's not a 4x5. It's a full frame. It comes close to the format of 35 millimeter, but it's not like.
How big is the CCD?
The full format one, I don't have one of those, and they're big. You know, I can't lug those things around. I mean,
So it has to be luggable. Okay. Good.
well, nowadays I just use my iPhone a lot, but we'll see.
Well, that's a question of resolution because they're so good. It's ridiculous.
They're very good. And then what I do with the work in the end is it's like it doesn't really have to be a perfect photograph because it goes through, so many changes anyway. They're kind of like painted almost, yeah. So.
Can you talk about the color in that one? How do they come into being?
The red?
Yeah.
I was looking for blood.
So it's added,
But-
right? It's sprayed.
Oh, yeah, it's sprayed. Sorry, yes. That's what I used to do a lot, as Andy knows. I used to, my work was developed in black and white, but then I would spray these transparent colors on them. So that's what I did on this piece as well. There's also some chalk and pastels in the reflection that's just painted on. And so
It's very aesthetic.
and the color came actually initially, the idea came from the book because in the demon, the guy has cut off the head of a king or something, and it's like bleeding. So again, it was a little bit of irony in it, but then I was also serious about the color of blood.
So you could edit that. You could just look at that as a giant X and think, minimalism, blah blah blah. Or you could look at pictures in the book and say, oh, holy moly, it's regicide, right? Or whatever, demonic something or other.
Yeah, it must have done something bad. I don't know. Or it could be an astrological sign. I didn't pay too much attention to.
Yeah. Which is, sort of like narrative versus, straightforward composition. And either of those will deliver for you, yeah, and keep delivering.
I wanted to just add a historical note. I think it is true that in these beautiful, gorgeous places that we associate with sexuality and confinement, there is a lot of violence.
Right.
The king is killed. Sometimes women are involved
There's
in it.
a lot
Women
of-
are killed.
Yes.
So I think for me it really resonates.
Right,
And again, writing this whole thing on the end of the Catholics, right? And what happens in the harem, and I'm like, yes, there's all that beauty, sexuality, sensuality, but there's also a lot of violence.
Right, exactly. And I have to add that I changed the original image that was on the stand, and that stand is made, I think, I associated with the Quran, which the mullahs used to read the Quran from it. So I replaced it with the demon's book. Why not? That was more appropriate.
I'm cognizant of your time, so I wanted to say, and I know we're already over a little bit, so I wanted to say this might be a good time to break and give everyone time to look around.
Thank
look
you.
closely at the work, and maybe if anyone has a question or two, they can ask as we're in the gallery, but feel free to look around.
Thanks for
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.